Hello, this is Albert Dahm, and today we're going to be talking about Canto 10 of Dante's Inferno. And by Canto 10, we have gotten through the gates of Dis. The angel has opened the door for us, and the Furies and the Gorgon aren't bothering us anymore. And now we're traveling through the sixth circle, which is the circle of heretics, the burning tomb. And eventually we'll get through there, we'll get to the Minotaur, and then we'll hang out with the centaurs, and we'll be in the circle of the violent against neighbors first and self, and then violent against God or nature. And beyond that is the eighth circle, which will deal with, of course, in later cantos. But right now, we're going to do. So, Canto 10. I said, I want to understand. The people buried there in the sepulchres, can they be seen? I mean, since all the lids are off the tombs and no one stands on guard. And they will be forever be locked up when they return here from Jehoshaphat with the bodies they left up in the world. The private cemetery on this side serves Epicurus and his followers who make the soul die when the body dies. As for the question you just put to me, it'll be answered soon while we are here, and the wish you're keeping from me will be granted. So now we have two issues here. First of all, what's all this about Jehoshaphat? And then Epicurus. We'll answer both of them. But first, we just need to understand the contrappossio. Remember, we always need to look at the contrappossio whenever we're studying any of the circles. There's always a contrappossio. And the contrappossio of the heretics, whose souls are buried within these sarcophagi, thus involves a troping of death. Their entombment within the kingdom of the dead suggests that they are in some way more dead than the other dead and damned souls. In the hell, they are buried in tombs that signify their willful turning away from the life of Christian truth to death of disbelief. Now, here it would be useful to look at the definition of heresy from the Catechism. Heresy is the obstinate post-baptismal denial of some truth which must be believed with divine and Catholic faith, or is likewise an obstinate doubt concerning the same. Apostasy is a total repudiation of Christian faith. Schism is a refusal of submission to the Roman pontiff or of communion with the members of the church subject to him. Now, note some key things. First of all, it's post-baptismal denial. So, a non-Christian or non-Catholic, well, a non-Christian cannot be a heretic. A Jew cannot be a heretic. A Muslim cannot be a heretic. A Hindu, only a Christian. Second, you notice the word obstinate. That doesn't mean that you're having problems or issues or you don't know quite what to do. Obstinacy is a key point, that you're very firmly committed to your heresy and will not by any means listen to the church. And then also the final part is which must be believed with divine and Catholic faith. In other words, there are certain issues that are perhaps good for you to believe or useful or what have you, but are not that key. So these three things have to be operative for that to be the case. Now, this is just a map sort of inserted in here just of lower hell in case you're wondering where we go after the seventh circle and the eighth circle. We'll talk about this some more. There are 10 divisions of the eighth circle and little pockets of evil, and that's the evil of fraud. But meanwhile, let's get back to Jehoshaphat, and that was mentioned at the start of this canto. And what it's saying is a reference to Joel chapter 3, verse 12. Let the nations be aroused and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. And so Joel's prophesying that there's going to be a judgment, which we believe. We believe there's a second coming and a final judgment. And Joel's implying it's the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which happens to be the valley right between the Mount of Olives and the city of Jerusalem. So here's the city of Jerusalem, and if you look back this way, it'd be the Mount of Olives. You see all these tombs, and these are actually people who, I guess, want a head start to figure out it's a good place to be buried in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And you see these little rocks here that people leave as a connotation of their visit with the deceased. So that's the Valley of Jehoshaphat, supposedly the time of the second coming. We'll be there, and this is where we'll receive our bodies back. Now, let's talk about the second thing that we saw in the beginning of this canto, which is the Epicureans. Now, an Epicurean is a philosophical system, and it's not that you're an epicure. This guy right here is an epicure. He likes his food, likes his fine wine, and he's all about being a connoisseur. No, Epicureanism is quite a bit different. And then we can see that it's named after Epicurus of Samos, who lived, from 341 BC to 270 BC. He's a founder of the Garden Commune, and Epicureanism, which is a comprehensive philosophy, a quasi-religion, which these days is probably more religion than quasi. Practical, anti-speculative bent. He was basically a materialist, is what it's about, so there's not much to speculate about. Wrote a lot, but we now have only a few letters and fragments as well as reports. Lasted in the 4th century AD. Now, that I'd have to take issue with, because really Epicureanism did not go away. Obviously, Dante is concerned with it. He's going to be visiting in this circle, a group of epicures from Florence, and also it's really around today. But just here's another look at the two Greco-Roman ideas that were fairly materialistic and quasi-religions. Again, Epicureanism, founded by Epicurus, and emphasized Epicurean philosophers believed that the only real things are those we can experience with our 5 senses. So they didn't believe in anything spiritual, so you might say they certainly wouldn't believe in an afterlife, wouldn't believe in heaven, wouldn't believe in hell. So the Epicureans are in hell, just don't believe they're there because they don't believe in hell. The ultimate good is seeking pleasure and achieving harmony of body and mind. And it's not crass in a way. It's a very complicated, nuanced philosophy. And the seeking of pleasure, it's not just going out and getting drunk and all that. As a matter of fact, it's not getting drunk. It's balancing the right pleasure, and it has to do with the food you eat, friendships you form, and all that. So, but all of it's now. Nothing else but now counts. There is no future. There is no afterlife. There is no God. Stoicism is another philosophy we have to keep in mind. It's founded by Zeno. And Stoic philosophers believe that humans should not pressure desires like power and wealth because these are dangerous. The ultimate good is seeking knowledge and showing no motion towards pleasure or pain. Hence we get the term Stoic from that. Someone who's stoical is one who is very logical and does not react to either pleasure or pain. Sort of like Spock from Star Trek. Now, I said again, I'll say again here, that Epicureanism it's a modern philosophy. So this doesn't just die in the Roman Empire. And here's a book published in 2019 by Catherine Wilson, How to Be an Epicurean, The Ancient Art of Living Well. And then, of course, remember we have the Stoics, which apparently do not include this fellow here, who's not being very stoical about his book problem. And we have this cartoon here. I'm sorry, sir, but you have depression. Here's a prescription that should help. Read Epicurus and Lucretius. Lucretius was a Roman author about the time of Christ who wrote on nature and wrote an Epicurean look at the world. Then let's consider this post from this website, why Epicurean ideas suit the challenge of modern secular life. Imagine Epicurus would see far more consumption than necessary in my own American life and too little self-discipline. Above all, he wanted us to take responsibility for our choices. Here he is in a letter. For it's not drinking bouts and continuous partying, enjoying boys and women, or consuming fish and other dainties of an extravagant table, which produce the pleasant life, but sober calculation, which searches out the reasons for every choice and avoidance and drives out the opinions which are the source of the greatest turmoil for men's souls. Do you see the pursuit of happiness as a tough research project? And kick yourself when you're glum? You're an Epicurean. We think of the Stoics as tougher, but they provided the comfort of faith. Accept your fate, they said. Epicurus says it's a mess. Be smarter than the rest of them. How modern can you get? And that is kind of a scary question, really. Now, this is a quote from Dreyer, who will meet at the end of this talk. It's fitting then that the Epicureans dwell eternally in a grave, since that is what they expected out of the afterlife. Once again, contra passio, is it not true? They expected to be in a grave in the afterlife, well, and God obliged them. And finally, when we consider the Epicureans and the idea of no resurrection, realize just how key it was, and really St. Paul had these people in mind, and probably some others when he was writing 1 Corinthians chapter 15, when he talked about the resurrection. And one key point he makes is that if the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. In other words, we should be Epicureans if there's no resurrection. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And when we're dead, we're like Rover, we're dead all over. Dante's treatment of the Epicurean heresy is fascinating in part because it's oblique. He addresses the Epicurean rejection of the eternal and transcendent by showing us two souls which remain eternally enmeshed, the transitory and the ephemeral. We'll see this. Again, since the present is all that matters to them, that is all that they see. And so, in effect, Dante dramatizes their materialism. And we'll see this in just a moment. O Tuscan, walking through our flaming city, alive and speaking with such elegance, be kind enough to stop for a while. Your mode of speech identifies you clearly as the one whose birthplace is that noble city with which in my time perhaps I was too harsh. So someone is talking to him, and we'll see in a minute this someone is Farinata. One of the vaults resounded suddenly with these clear words, and I, intimidated, drew up a little closer to my guide, who said, "What are you doing? Turn around and look at Farinata, who has risen. You will see him from the waist up, standing straight." I already had my eyes fixed on his face. There he stood out tall, with his chest and brow proclaiming his disdain for all this hell. And here's Gustave Doré's woodcutting of this. It's really one of his more famous ones. Here's Farinata sitting here addressing the pilgrim and Virgil. The narrative structure of Inferno 10 reflects the enmeshed density of this excessive attachment to the present. By splicing the dialogues with Farinata and Cavalcante, which we'll meet in just a minute, who shares the tomb with Farinata, into one another, Dante dramatizes the way that these souls are so caught up with their own selves that they literally do not hear or in any way register each other's suffering. Thus, exquisitely poignant 21 verses that make up the encounter between Dante and Cavalcanti are entirely ignored by Farinata, who resumes speaking to Dante in verse 73 as though his tomb-mate did not exist, and as though the conversation between Cavalcanti and Dante about his son Guido has not occurred. Part of Farinata's contrapposto is a rise from the grave, replaying Christ's resurrection, which he denied. Interesting, is it not? And here is Dante's comment on all this. This is from his Convivio. Remember, Dante wrote other things besides the Divine Comedy. Before he wrote the Divine Comedy, this is one of them. And here's what he says. I say that all the follies, the most foolish, the basest, and most pernicious is the belief that beyond this life there is no other. The Inferno's second installment in Florentine politics is thus a second reference to the pain and dishonor of Dante's own exile. Inferno 10 dramatizes the use of weaponized language to create walls of separation and exclusion, which is, of course, what's happening not just in Florence, but in our time too. Is it not true? Unfortunately. Now we'll continue. My guide, with a gentle push, encouraged me to move among the sepulchres towards him. Be sure you choose your words with care, he said. And when I reached the margin of his tomb, he looked at me, and half contemptuously, he asked, "And who would your ancestors be?" And I, who wanted only to oblige him, held nothing back, but told him everything. At this, he lifted up his brows a little, then said, "How bitter enemies of mine they were, and of my ancestors and my party. I had to scatter them not once, but twice. They're expelled, but only to return from everywhere," I said. "Not once, but twice. An art your men, however, never mastered." And this is from Dreyer. This is Farinata Uberti, a magnificent bastard who led the Ghibelline faction in Florence for most of the 13th century. He betrayed Guelph-led Florence to her Ghibelline enemies in Siena, but when the victorious Sienese wanted to destroy the city, Farinata refused to let them. They compromised by leveling all the homes of the leading Guelph families. Later, when the Guelphs came back into power, they repaid the Uberti by demolishing their mansions. See what's happening here? Farinata is living for all eternity in hell, and the first thing he wants to know is whether or not this extraordinary visitor from the mortal life is good enough to deign to converse with. Farinata is keeping up appearances. He still believes that distinctions he held on earth matter here in hell. And why not? Given that he believed that the earthly life was the only one that mattered. Just then, along the same tomb's open ledge, a shade appeared, but just down to his chin, besides this other. I think he got up kneeling. He looked around as though he hoped to see if someone else perhaps had come with me. And when his expectation was deceived, he started weeping. "If it be great genius that carries you along with this blind jail, where's my son? Why is he not with you?" There's no grace in either man. All Farinata cares about is his family, his political party, and his personal status back in Tuscany. All Cavalcanti cares about is his son's status as a poetic genius. They cannot care about anything else because they believe that the mortal life was all that existed, and that the point of that life was to enjoy the things that gave them pleasure, poetry, politics, and so forth. They insisted on those divisions even though their warfare contributed to death and dying in Florence. Dante's exile, and for that matter, Cavalcanti's, Guido Cavalcanti, which is the son of the Cavalcanti in the tomb, came because too many Florentines and Tuscans insisted that their divisions were more important than what they held in common. A lesson for us, perhaps. And remember, Guido Cavalcanti is the Cavalcanti in the tomb's son. What Dante the poet says here is that their heretical belief that life on earth is all that exists led them to embrace with passion the things of this world. And that, in turn, led to their blind and destructive egotism. This had dramatic consequences for their communities, their families, their city, their region, and their church. Dante is moving towards a vision of cosmic harmony. First, he has to see the consequences of division, of people being so passionate about the things they love in the world that they made life for everyone a living hell. There is no such thing as common ground or a common vision, nor did they even occur to them that some things are more important than temporal gain. Their insistence that this day and this life is the only thing that exists led them to destroy the tomorrows of their fellow citizens. Rather sad, isn't it? Farinata doesn't understand why the Florentines living at the time hate him and his family. Dante explains that he and the Sienese-backed forces turned the river Arbia red with Guelph blood at the Battle of Monteperti, which led to Ghibelline takeover of Florence. Over 10,000 Guelphs died in that battle versus only 600 Ghibellines, and it resulted in exile of many Florentine Guelphs and the annihilation of their homes by the vengeful Ghibellines. This happened only 40 years before Dante meets Farinata in hell. It should not come as a surprise that the Guelphs in Florence hold the family of the man who led the armies that ruined them in contempt. He sold them all out. For his part, Farinata believes that they ought to be grateful to him for preventing the Sienese from leveling Florence entirely. Truly, this man's ego knows no bounds. Hersman and Cook point out that there is no magnanimity in his gesture. The victorious Farinata wanted to rule over Florence, but if there is no Florence left, there will be no spoils for him to gather. Farinata thinks of himself as a great man. He came from a prominent family, he was a serious thinker, and he led his party to victory on the field of battle. Yet there he is in hell, and in his arrogance, he refuses to recognize it. He did everything right by his own philosophy. He loved what he should have loved, and loved them in a way he should have loved them. No wonder he scorns hell. Still, all his accomplishments on earth passed away within a generation. And, as we prophesied to Dante, his own political accomplishments in Guelph-led Florence will soon turn to dust as well. Reading Dante, this canto in particular, as Canto 10, but also the entire Commedia, helped me to see things I couldn't see. And this is Ron Dreyer talking about the book he wrote and his meditation on Dante. It had not occurred to me that disordered love could be so destructive, at least not in this way. How could you love the idea of family too much and the idea of place too much? It's not hate, so how could it be wrong? I saw how it could be wrong. I saw that the insistence on the primacy of these divisions, on treating them as fundamental, unalterable facts of life that gave life meaning and structure, could refuse grace and tragically ensure that these divisions become permanent. I had done all I could to bridge the chasm. There's literally nothing more I could do. This wrecked me. What I could do, and what I did, was this. recognized the extent to which my heart of hearts I had always accepted this judgment and oriented my own interior life around it. The division existed tangibly in the world, and because of that, it existed in my own soul as well. It came between God and me and made me think that God loved me, but he couldn't possibly approve of me, no matter what I did. My spiritual life, I came to see, had been for many years oriented around appeasing a God whom I was constantly failing in my duties regarding faith and morals. I remember the afternoon I was sick with a mononucleosis brought on by my intense anxiety over all this, and lying in bed reading the Commedia. I put the book down and began to pray with all these things in mind. Suddenly I felt a presence in the room with me and an inexplicable physical sensation washing over my body. I knew instantly that God loved me, and I knew also that he always had and always would. This conviction had, in that mystical moment, been set in my heart like a foundation stone. It would be the basis on which I would build my new life. Dante the poet had been passionately involved in artistic and political disputes in his day, and they had nearly destroyed him. As you know, if you read the Purgatorio, he confesses to Beatrice that the source of all the confusion that led to him to the dark wood in the middle of the journey of our life was his placing false delights, art, romantic love, party politics, above the things of eternity, above all God. And needless to say, the people in this circle had done exactly that. Now let's continue. I do not come alone, I said to him. That one waiting over there guides me through here. The one perhaps your Guido held in scorn. Remember, that's his son. The place of pain assigned him, and what he asked already had revealed his name to me and made my pointed answer possible. Instantly, he sprang to his full height and cried, "What did you say? He held? Is he not living? The day's sweet life no longer strikes his eyes?" When he heard the silence of my delay responding to that question, he collapsed into his tomb, not to be seen again. Now, at this point, you really need to know something, if you don't know already. Farinata is Guido Cavalcanti's father-in-law. In other words, the son of this guy in the tomb was married to Farinata's daughter. So Guido is Farinata's son-in-law. But again, notice these guys have that in common, but they don't, and they're sitting in there for all eternity, but they don't relate to one another at all. That's kind of remarkable, isn't it? And pointed as to the nature of their sin. Okay, now Guido Cavalcanti was exiled in 1300 for factionalism. You can imagine if he was in 1300 exiled for factionalism, he must have been quite a factionist. Dante was prior, and prior was one of the leaders, and voted in favor of the exile. Guido returned after Dante left office, but died of disease caught in exile. So Dante was complicit in the exiling of Guido and would soon be exiled himself. While the original love that subtends all our actions, whether good actions or evil, is, for most sinners in Dante's hell, perverted and distorted beyond all recognition, in Dante's treatment of the Epicureans, we can still individuate the disordered converso towards a changeable good that Thomas Aquinas delineates as sin. As defined by Aquinas, sin consists of two elements. One, aversion, the turning away from the changeless good. Two, conversion, the disordered turning towards a changeable good. And when that changeable good is a beloved child whose well-being the Father still craves, the impact on us as human beings is very great. This canto forces us to consider how emotions in which we all share can ultimately become reified and sinful. In effective terms, Cavalcante Sr.'s desperate questions, "Where is my son? Why is he not with you?" may be self-inflicted, but we feel their pathos and poignancy nonetheless. The other stately sage, at whose request I had first stopped the talk, showed no concern, nor moved his head, nor turned to see what happened. He merely picked up where he left off. "If that art they did not master," he went on, "that gives me greater pain than does this bed. But the queen whose reigns down here will glow no more than 50 times before you learn how hard it is to master such art." In other words, he's predicting Dante's exile within about 50 months. "And as I hope that you may once more know the sweet world, tell me, why should your party be so harsh to my clan in every law they make?" I answered, "The massacre and butchery that stains the waters of Arbia red now causes such laws to issue from our councils." He sighed, shaking his head. "It was not I alone who took part," he said, "nor certainly would I have joined the rest without good cause. But I alone stood up when all of them were ready to have Florence razed. It was I who openly stood in her defense. And now, as I would have your seed find peace," I said, "I beg you to resolve a problem that has kept my reason tangled in a knot. If I have heard correctly, all of you can see ahead to what the future holds, but your knowledge of the present is not clear." And he answered, "Down here we see like those with faulty vision, who only see," he said, "what's at a distance. This much the sovereign Lord grants us here. When events are close to us, and when they happen, our minds is blank, and were it not for others, we would know nothing of your living state. Thus you can understand how all our knowledge would be completely dead at the time when the door to future things is closed forever. So thus, when the second judgment comes and there's no future earth going on, they lose that sight." And so it's another contrapasso. These souls are so materialistically attached to the present, can know events in the future, but not in the present. Hence, these materialists who believe only in the present and in what they could see and touch and love in the present are now cut off from the present altogether. Dante, in this way, separates from knowledge those who thought they knew everything worth knowing, thereby again figuring heresy as a willful separation from life and truth. To recapitulate, the Epicureans' materialistic attachment only to the present, only to their time on earth, their rejection of the future life in eternity, results in their eternal attachment to the present, with all its conflict and pain preserved. We see the pain caused by excessive attachment, excessive love for things of the earth, in other words, for those goods that theologians call secondary goods, in both the interaction with Farinata and his interaction with Cavalcanti Sr. Now, just in case you want to play out the Battle of Monteperti, you can. This is a game that's available for purchase, which I have not done, which is Battles of Monteperti and Campadino. And so you can play them and see if you can do better than the Welsh. Maybe not lose as badly. Then I, moved by regret for what I'd done, said, "Now, will you please tell the fallen one his son is still on earth among the living. Well, here's a question for you to ponder. You probably know the answer. Do you think he does? He said, more than 1,000 lie with me. The second Frederick is here, and the cardinal is with us, and the rest I shall not mention. And the second Frederick is Frederick II, the Holy Roman Emperor, who was quite the materialist, that's for sure, quite the Epicurean to a large degree. And here is his portrait, is one of his coins, and this is an obverse of it. And he was quite the enemy of the church, and here he is. The cardinal is Cardinal Ottaviani Ubaldini. He was born at Florence into the noble local Ghibelline family. He was appointed Archbishop of Bologna in 1240, but the appointment was not confirmed since he was considered too young. On May 28, 1244, he was made a cardinal by Pope Innocent IV with the titulus of Santa Maria in Via Lata. Contemporary writers indicate Ottaviano was a strong supporter of the Ghibelline cause. He said of himself, I can say, if I had a soul, I lost it for the Ghibellines. And that is just awful if you can or would say that. Now, the next slide here I'm going to show you is a YouTube recording of an interview of Rod Dreher about his book, How Dante Can Save Your Life. And he's being interviewed on EWTN. Now, the last time I put a recording on this YouTube talk of mine, it didn't come through. Now, I think I'm going to solve this issue this time, but I want some input, and just let me know if you can play this. I have a plan. I think it's going to work. First of all, I'm going to present the video, and then after that, I'm going to put another slide, which is a joke, but it's just there to hopefully make the video play and also maybe make you laugh just a little bit, maybe both. So here we go. And like I say, let me know if you play this. If this doesn't work this time, next week I've got another way of doing this, but we'll see if this works first.
Now, once again,